That passage today is interesting, I think, in many different ways. One of the things that really struck me the most, though, was that the blind man, Bartimaeus, sought out Jesus when he heard he was there, because he knew deep down inside that Jesus was the only one that could help him. He rose up against the crowd who was trying to hush him, and he was moved in his very spirit. Here was this man who was not only physically blind, but his blindness extended beyond that. He was a person who we would say had blind faith. Oh, what a true glorious blessing blind faith really is. It is a kind of innocence. An innocence that really harkens back to our youth. That once upon a time, when everything was full of so much promise and wonder. A time when we had simple amazement in all things that were unknown. Earlier this year, I was shopping at our local Dollar Tree store and came walking up and saw a selection of crosses and thought it would be a good idea to get one for my grandma, and sat there and looked at them. And they had a few different messages. There was 3 of them, if I remember correctly. One was about love, another about peace, and a third one about faith. And while I was kneeling down at the crosses, deep in my own thought, trying to figure out which one would be best to get Grandma, this little child came running up and grabbed one, and his face just lit up. And he turned around and he looked at his grandmother and said, "Grandma, can I get one for Dad?" And his grandmother sat there and said, "Yeah, that'd be okay." So I was already kneeling down, reading these crosses, and I read each of the messages to the little boy. And I asked him, "Which one do you think your dad would enjoy?" And he picked the faith one. Now here I was, already touched by the whole moment, and I just wanted to know more about the story. That here this kid was just so excited to get this cross for his dad. And I was wondering what the backstory was. Is his father away fighting a war? Is he traveling? So I asked him, "When do you plan on giving this to your dad?" And he just sat there and he looked at me. This little child holding this little cross of faith in his hand. Big smile on his face. "Oh, Daddy? He's in heaven." And he said it with just this look of fact on his face. Like, "You didn't know that?" But then he was continued on, and he's like, "But I talk to him all the time. And someday, I will see him again." This child had blind faith. But as many of us grow up, and as we learn, and we are taught to seek answers, some of that innocence of youth are simply lost. Much of the simple amazements and some of the joy leaves us. Perhaps some of this is true for many of us in our life of faith as well. What we considered simply in the hands of God at one time have now become complications in our human mind. As we live our life, we attempt to learn all of life's lessons. And as life event builds upon life event, we become blind to the true messages and acts of God. But we must remember the advice that Paul offers us in Romans chapter 1, verses 28 through 29. "And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind and to things that should not be done. They were filled with every kind of wickedness So you see, with faith, everything is possible. The horizon is limitless. But without faith, every type of evil is possible as well. That is the curse that has befallen man since the time of Adam. We are all born with the possibility to do so much good in this world. Yet at the same time, we are born with the capability of so much vile evil, as much as history can attest to. Faith is believing in something as a truth without needing the evidence to support the fact. Faith in God may be a burden to the human mind for some, but the love of God and the trust that He will support us in our darkest moments far outweigh what in reality is truly a selfish burden. As it says in Mark 8:12, and he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, Why? Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly I tell you, no sign will be given to this generation. As many of us struggle with our faith, we often ask God to send us a sign. Give me the proof, God, and then I will believe. Perhaps this sounds like some of us or some that we know. I know this sounds a lot like doubting Thomas. But proof is really not what faith is about. But let us take a moment to ponder upon the possibility of God answering our prayers and giving us the proof that we seek. In today's world, do you really think that we would see this as a true message from God? Or rather, would it be more likely that we would question and seek a reason behind this event? It has become the custom and the norm for our society to use our so-called reason and seek beyond face value of things. What once could have easily have passed for a miracle in another age is now simply explained with facts upon fact. And these once miracles, such as life itself, are now explained as a simple biological process, or one of my favorites, a series of unrelated events that magically combine mindlessly to cause said event with no intelligence required to make the process complete. Perhaps this is a burden of the human soul. Perhaps this is simply a symptom of sin that causes us to doubt our faith. I like to view our doubts and concerns in a slightly different light. I choose to see them as a test of our faith. It is our journey through this shadow of the valley of doubt that makes the sunrise of our strength and faith so much brighter when our journey is finished. As Paul writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 16 through 18, so we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for eternal weight of glory beyond all measure. Because we look not at what can be seen, but at what cannot be seen. For what can be seen is temporary, but what cannot be seen is eternal. It may seem odd that, perhaps I should say, that we should all wish to be a little blind. For us to close our eyes so that we can see with God's. But I say faith requires a bit of blindness. Perhaps we will never approach the level of blind faith that, say, the centurion in Luke chapter 7 does, who asked Jesus to heal his servant, stating that I too know what it is like to command. And when I tell someone to go, they go. He had the faith that if Jesus said, "Be healed," his servant would be healed. But blind faith is truly a blessing. The blind beggar had it, and he was blessed with sight. Could you just imagine a blind world full of faith? Glory indeed to the Father. Amen.